So, like, just speak on the music scene in Dayton, Ohio. So, from what I understand, because I've been to Cleveland a few times, and um, Dayton is somewhat of a small city, but there was so much talent that circulated throughout, the city. So, just talk about some of the groups that spawned from that scene and um, how everyone sort of gravitated towards funk.
Well, I'll start by saying James Brown came to the Midwest and settled in Cincinnati
Hmm.
at King Records. And at that time, he got some Midwest cats from Cincinnati. He got Bootsy, Catfish.
Hmm.
And that was a big deal because James Brown, for us, was the biggest artist in the world. He settled in the Midwest right down the street from Dayton.
Hmm.
Now, the Ohio Players was the first group that really kicked off from Dayton. And they had been playing back up to different artists prior to them doing their own thing. So the Ohio Players jump off in the late 60s, right?
Hmm.
And their first joint was Pain. And we heard this song and it was unbelievable. It was funky, it was unique, it was original, and they blew up. And so all of us who came behind them, and they were 10 years older than me, but then there were some guys like perhaps we'll talk about Lakeside or we'll talk about the Wilder Brothers. And they were sort of in between the Ohio Players and people like Slave. Slave was sort of like the youngest side of the Dayton movement.
Hmm.
That being said, though, thing about the Ohio Players, they were so original. Their run was so long and they could do it all. Great ballads, great funky stuff, jazzy, bluesy stuff. They did it all. And instead of us all trying to sound like the Ohio Players, we wanted to be unique in our own way, the way the Ohio Players were, but in our own way. So we were influenced by them we gotta be original.
Right.
So some of the units that came out of Dayton, a lot of people don't know. We'll start, like I said, with the Ohio Players. We'll talk about Lakeside. We'll talk about the group Sun. Vesta Williams as a solo artist. We'll talk about Slave, faze-o, Heat Wave, a combination of Dayton and Europe. Rod Temperton, a couple of those guys came over from the UK. That being said, man, in the late 60s, early 70s, on up through the mid 80s, Dayton was booming. You had the group Dayton.
Hmm.
And you had the Trotman, Zapp, and those guys. So, I mean, it was killing. It was all at the same time. So we were all on the charts and kicking it at the same time. But we knew each other coming up doing Battle of the Bands and talent shows.